welcome everybody to the A Little Less Fear podcast. Today's topic is gender identities, and I'm interviewing Mr. Van Ethan Levy, the author of Gender Identities. Did I say your name correct?
Yeah, so you said my name correctly. However, I don't use Mr. as my prefix.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. So I use MX. That's like M like Mary, X like X-ray.
Wow, that's interesting. I've never seen that. What does MX stand for?
So it's a prefix that feels most comfortable for me because I don't resonate with Mr. And then if we think about the patriarchy in terms of when somebody is a miss and they go to a Mrs., it's because they got married, and it's showing ownership versus the individuality or equality and equity. And so to kind of remove myself from, kind of perpetuating that violence that's typically against women, but also on trans people, I use MX as my prefix.
Now, is this prefix, this is new to me, being honest with you, I've never seen MX before. Is this prefix now being recognized? I guess, let's say that if you're filling something out, let's say voting registration, will that be on there as a prefix now? Or is this something that's like a movement, something that's starting?
So it's definitely been around for a long time. Is it on voters registration? That I don't know, but on voter registration, it also only allows you to put male or female. It doesn't even allow you to put non-binary, which is recognized at the state levels, but not at the federal level. So it's a little difficult to answer that because I'm truly not sure.
Now, how do you define a non-binary?
So for me, non-binary is so unique to the individual. It's like asking 100 women, what does it mean to be a woman? You're going to get 100 different answers. So what it means, what it means to me to be non-binary is that I don't feel like I have to stick to our societal constructs of masculinity or femininity. And what I mean by societal constructs is every culture or upbringing that you're in, there's a different definition as to what it means to be male, what it means to be female. A few examples are, blue is for boys, pink is for girls, men are strong and women are nurturing and caring. And so I don't, in the way that we know it's constructed is, an example is, if you were to see somebody who is male wearing a skirt in the US, one might say that there's a man wearing women's clothing. Whereas if you then go to Scotland, and you see somebody wearing the same thing, it would be a man wearing his women's clothing because men can wear kilts.
Right, because men can wear skirts there.
Being non-binary allows me to just be my authentic self, whatever that is, and not feel like I have to adhere to our culture of masculinity and femininity. I get to just be myself.
Okay, well, that makes sense. And is non-binary, is that the same reason why you go by the pronoun they?
Yeah, so I use they, them pronouns because I feel like it encapsulates all of me. I feel like there's so much tied to all these. When I say tied, I mean when people hear she, hers, or he, him, I feel like there's all these connotations that are connected to it. Whereas they, them feels like more of an everything. Again, I get to show up with all parts of myself, everything for who I am, and not just what people believe somebody to be based on, again, those gender societal constructs.
I see. I had some inquiries in regards to the they, them pronouns. And some of the inquiries or some of the questions that people were wondering was if you are identifying yourself as they, them, is that the same as being plural?
So there's a few things with that. So no, it's not about being plural. It's also shoot, there's somebody at my door. As we know, in day of COVID age, like anything can happen. So I apologize for that. Someone was knocking.
Sure.
So no, it's not about being plural. And so they, them, when you had asked, do you identify it as they, them? And then there was the finishing of the question. I do want to address that as well, is that using they, them pronouns, or your pronouns being they, them, it's not an identity. It's sharing how to be addressed versus my identity is non-binary. And again, it's just to allow all of me to be present, not that there's multiple versions of me. It's okay. I think of it as parts, right? In terms of if we look at a societal construct of masculinity and femininity, everybody has all of those different parts. It's what feels authentic to ourselves and what comes forward. And so it's allowing all these different parts of me to be present, whether it's we're having a beard and wearing makeup. One might think of makeup at part as being feminine or female, and one might think of having a beard as masculine.
Sure. Okay, I'm understanding. So basically, they is more of an all-around description on how you feel, and you feel both energies are consistent to your full identity.
Yes and no. So yes, you're correct in that conceptualization, and no in the sense that I don't truly believe that there are different energies. I believe that there's different understandings as to what masculinity and femininity is, but my belief is that there is no such thing. There is no such thing as masculinity. There is no such thing as femininity. It's just what we've put into these boxes with these labels. And it's saying, let me be free of this box. Let me be free of these labels. Let me just be me and do what feels right without having it be equated to anything else. Does that make sense?
Yes, that actually does make sense. Basically, just being human, correct?
Exactly.
So how would we explain this though to older generations? Let's say people that are in their 60s or 70s, or even just people my age, because this is all new for me too. I'm about to be 41 and this is all a whole new world for me too. So I'm understanding this, but how would we explain this to somebody that's hearing this for the very, very first time? The easiest way, if somebody says to you, let's say an 80-year-old person meets you and they're like, hi, oh, he's cute. And you're like, oh, wait, no, I go by they. And then they look at you like, wait, what? How would you explain that in simple terms for somebody their age to understand?
There's not just one way to explain it to them in terms of simple terms, because you really have to understand how people conceptualize things. Like some people could be just as simple as my pronouns are they, them. That's what feels authentic to me. And then the conversation's done. There's some people who might need to be able to understand it from their own perspective. And so even exploring with them, has there ever been anything in your life that you really wanted to do, but were told that you weren't because you were the gender that you are, right? Let's say that it was a grandmother who always wanted to play football, but was told that they were not allowed to because they were a woman.
Uh-huh.
Imagine having that freedom to be able to do what you want without these gender constrictions, and then share and then paralleling it. That's what it feels like when pronouns are used for me that don't align with me. I feel like I'm being put into a box and forced to do or be somebody that I am not.
That
And
makes sense.
for me, it's all about cultivating empathy for the person I'm engaging with and then helping them understand and cultivate empathy for me. Because we both can have opposing beliefs, yet still coexist, and neither one of us are wrong.
And when did you realize that this was the best way to identify yourself?
So I felt like this was my authentic self when I started exploring and understanding more about my own internalized transphobia. And so 100% of every single human being has internalized transphobia. Nobody is immune to it. And we will always.
Can you explain what internalized transphobia is to the people that don't know what that is?
Yeah, so I was getting there. I was leading up to that. So
Thank you.
yeah, of course, thank you. So everyone has it. It's all within us because of the cultures, because the culture that we live in, and how we what internalized transphobia is. It's everything that we're exposed to is gendered, and therefore we internalize it as matter of fact. So an example is boys have penises, women have vaginas, right? That's an internalized transphobia because that's what we've learned and that's what we've come to understand. But there's no actual medical evidence that indicates that men have penises and women have vaginas, because there are folks who are intersex, there are folks who are not even intersex, who have these different body parts that we've stated are for one gender, but really are not. Internalized transphobia is every single thing that we've ever learned about gender, and we've internalized it as fact. So the moment that we start saying that this is fact when it's about gender is going to be part of our internalized transphobia. Blue is for boys, internalized transphobia. And there's different ways that it shows up. Did that explanation help, or would you like me to try a little bit more?
Keep going.
Okay, so Every message we receive, even from before we come out of the womb, people are wondering what our genitals are so that they know if we're a boy or a girl, because that's what they're into. They're not checking, they're not looking at us from a biological perspective. They're not checking our hormones, they're not checking our gonads, they're not even checking our chromosomes. Most people don't know what their chromosomes are. And just because you have a penis doesn't mean that you have an XY chromosome, which is what people might equate to as masculinity. It gets broken down even more. Like there's even different things within the Y chromosomes that need to be present in order for a penis to show up in the person's body. So if we even break it down before we're out of the womb, then the moment we're born, we're given usually a pink or a blue beanie that's put on our head to indicate male or female. From the point of then on, it's, is it a boy or a girl? Should I buy Barbie dolls or GI Joe trucks? I don't even know if that's a thing, but you know what I mean? Like, do I buy boy toys or girl toys?
Yeah.
Then you start expressing emotions and communicating. Don't cry. Boys don't cry. Be tough. Get over it. You know, or you know, I can't think of any.
Yeah, they start molding their idea of what gender is.
So now we grow up with these ideas that we learned within our big culture in terms of the world, then within our cities, our states, our religious, our families, like whatever it is that we're constantly being exposed to our peer group as to what allows us to stay within our role of the gender that we were assigned at birth, and anything that veers from that risks being ostracized or ridiculed. And so now we have our internalized notions of what gender is, but there's based on transphobic notions. And it's transphobic because it doesn't allow people to just exist. And it erases the identities of people who don't fit within those molds, which are most of the time trans people, non-conforming people, non-binary people, even cisgendered people, right? Let's say that there's a cisgendered male who wants to do ballet. Unless he's like a brilliant ballet person growing up, he's probably most likely going to be ridiculed for his interests.
Right.
And that, again, is from our internalized transphobia, that men have to be this way, women have to be that way, and that there's only male and that there's only female.
Wow, this is really mind-blowing. So as you're speaking and educating me and our audience on this, my mind is thinking that in order for us to get rid of these there in fact end up being in a way negative connotations, we would have to construct a whole new society where we would have to get rid of he and she and just use they for everyone.
I wouldn't even necessarily say that. I would say that we all need to do our own work on our own understanding of what gender is. And even within ourselves, I guarantee you almost every single human being is limited in at least one way of something that they don't allow themselves to do because it doesn't align with the gender, with their own identity, whether they're trans or non-binary or cisgendered. I think that the world, the ideal utopic world, isn't everyone is they, them. Everyone is just, their pronoun is their name. Because then it's not pigeonholing them into any type of identity. Because there's still, even internalized, there's even transphobia within the non-binary community, that you have to look quote unquote androgynous, or that you have to use they, them pronouns, or that you have to be gender fluid, when there are many non-binary people who use he, him pronouns or she, her pronouns.
Right.
And are still valid and non-binary. Our pronouns are just what feels comfortable that we hear when other people are referring to us.
So basically, so that just as you're saying right now would be more individualistic than somebody growing up and finding out who they are and then being able to identify that way and asking that of people to basically represent them that way.
Yeah, because I could say Lino, he is great. I could also say Lino is great. Lino went to the store. Lino has a really cute cat, right? Like I don't need to continuously say he, him, his.
Right.
Just as easily just use the person's name, and it makes it more personable.
That's very true. That's very true. You know, I find I do identify myself as he and him. I find that I've identified this way for, I mean, a long time, even before I knew that this was who I am, you know, now. And I found he to be the most authentic feeling for myself. However, I also do see that there are feminine aspects of me, even physically. My hands, for example, I see my hands and I still kind of see some femininities, but also my personality, and I also see that in all genders. Like everybody, even the most masculine man can have, feminine attributes, and they can also be as masculine as they can, and then they themselves can feel feminine, I've noticed. But what can we tell new parents, for example, before they can run in and just all of a sudden start identifying their kid with, well, I'm gonna have a boy, I'm gonna have a girl? What can you do to open up? What can you tell our population, or just people in general, that are about to expect to have a child, I guess, their assumptions?
So I do want to answer that, and I promise you I will, but I do want to address a couple things you said, if that's all right.
Of course.
So even equating things to femininity and masculine cause it can be incredibly harmful because they're not. Having small hands isn't feminine, it isn't masculine. It's just having small hands. And the harm that it causes is that most of the things that are equated to masculinity, we also equate to strength, whereas a lot of the things that we equate to femininity are weak. If not saying having small hands is weak, it's not at all. But if you were to say, is it strong to have big hands or small hands? Is it powerful to have big hands or small hands? So it's causing more harm on our quote unquote feminine community. And again, like there is no such thing as masculinity. It's what we continue to tell ourselves is masculine. But again, there are many cisgendered men who have small hands. And then we have so much distaste within toxic masculinity or within men who don't want to be feminine. So now we tell a man that his hands are small and feminine, and there's that risk that he's going to hate that part of himself. But what is that also saying? That he hates femininity? That he doesn't embrace the femininity?
That's true.
So, but we don't hate masculinity. Well, I guess in some ways there is hate within against masculinity, but as a whole, it's kind of like gay and straight. Straight is such a horrible term because the opposite of straight is crooked, bent, broken, whatever it might be. So it's saying one is better, significantly better than the other. Do you want a straight line or a crooked line?
Right, 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 right.
Do you want big, powerful, strong hands, or do you want dainty, weak hands? Not saying that those two are the same, but that's how we're internalizing it at a subconscious level. So really shifting away from these labels and speaking to what they are. You have small hands. I have small hands. That's it. That's all they are. Small hands.
Wow, I really, really appreciate you making that clear. That totally makes sense. And it makes me feel better. Wow, I really needed you to explain this. Thank you so much. Um, Geez, let's see here. We have about 10 more minutes. So my next question, and it's going back to what you just said right now, as far as you said the words gay and straight. And that made me write that down because I know that there's just such a huge spectrum. And what can you say about transphobia within the gay community?
Okay, so I promise you I will answer that. I did want to also answer the new parents because I could do both of them really quick. So
Oh, great.
in terms of new parents, if it's too difficult for you to use your child's name and not use pronouns or gendered language, then always be open to allowing your child to explore what feels right for them. If you have a child that you've labeled a boy and they want to wear a pink dress, let them. It doesn't mean anything about their gender. It means nothing about their identity. It's a pink sparkly dress is a lot more appealing than maybe a dark gun or a black car. If we look at toys, typically what we call girl toys are bright, they're fun, they're shiny, they're inviting, like a child's mind really eager to learn and embrace. And a lot of the quote unquote boys' toys are darker, like literally color wise darker.
Very true.
So I would just say allow your child to consistently explore without putting labels on it. Don't panic that, oh my God, my son might be gay or trans because he wants to wear a dress. allow it to happen, and don't be your child's first bully, essentially. Like, allow them to explore, and they'll find what feels right for them. And then you asked about the transphobia within our own community. There is
Yes.
so much transphobia within our community in the trans, sorry, in the gay, lesbian, bisexual community, but especially even within the trans community, because trans people feel like they can't be transphobic because they are trans. And that is not true. We all have internalized transphobia. And so when we finally come to our own and find who we are, we went a certain route, but nobody gets anywhere on the same route. And so just because somebody's route looks different and they didn't end where you did, that doesn't mean that that is not who they are. And I find that a lot within the communities of, oh, if you don't want hormones and you're not trans, if you don't want surgery, you're not trans, if you still like, again, quote unquote, feminine things, then you're not really a man. There's all these different things that are weaponized against us within our own community. And again, especially in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, other sexual orientations community, there is also a lot of transphobia, because there's this lack of awareness that just because you're part of a community does not immune you from causing harm within that community.
Uh-huh.
Because again, just like I said at the beginning, 100% of us have internalized transphobia. We will always have internalized transphobia, but what we can do about it is constantly and consistently cultivate an awareness of how that internalized transphobia is showing up. In our conversation, it's shown up all over the place. Some of the stuff I address, some of the stuff I'm not even aware of, that even myself have engaged in, right? So an example of that internalized transphobia is having feminine hands. Your hands are not
Yeah.
feminine, they are small.
Right.
And so again, the best way to be an ally, the best way to be a supporter, the best way to even be your own authentic self is to always trust that your experience is real, and also always trust that the other person's experience is real. Nobody will ever know us better than we know ourselves, and we will never know anybody else better than they will know themselves. So trust them to teach you about them, and vice versa.
Wow, thank you so much. You rock, Van.
Thank you, you rock. Thank you for inviting me
Thank
here
you.
today.
And so, yeah, I guess the last 5 minutes, I wanted to going back on transphobia. If we have internalized transphobia, does that mean that we also have internalized homophobia?
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. Even thinking down to how we look at different, quote unquote, are you that kind of gay? Are you this kind of gay? Are you this kind of lesbian? Or like, I'm not one of those gays, right? Like the language that we're using within our own community. Again, even back to, I don't use straight, I use heterosexual, because the person is heterosexual. They are not better than me, and that is what their sexual orientation is. And again, back to that example of straight is good, anything else is less than. And I'm not less than because I'm not heterosexual.
Okay, so I have a question here. For example, I've been with both men and women, and it's been years for me. I've been celibate for over 6 years. So at this point, somebody that's not because this has nothing to do with being sexually active, correct? I mean, if I'm not sexually active at all, and I'm just celibate, but I identify as a he trans man, I mean, what are my multiple identities at this point, or what is the one identity? How would I identify myself correctly in this new version of the world if we're being mindful to people?
So the answer to that is exploring for yourself what feels right for you. So I can share with you my multiple identities if that might help give you an example,
Yeah,
but I can't
definitely.
tell you, what you are, right? So for me, I identify as queer when it comes to my sexual orientation, because it repurposes that word and feels empowering to me. It's very offensive to many people, and it's also empowering for me. So I would never apply it to others, only for myself. And it encapsulates all identities of the people who I would be in relation with. And by that, I mean, I don't care if you are trans, non-binary, non-conforming, male, female. All I care is that we connect and that our relationship nourishes each other. So that's my sexual relationship, my sexual orientation. And then, you know, my gender, or my identity, which is trans, because I was assigned one thing at birth that never felt right for me. not even what I was assigned that matters. I was socialized as female, and that's something that's important for me that people know, because the way we interact in the world is very different based on how we were socialized. And then non-binary, as I shared earlier, is that it allows me to be all the different parts of me that I am. And again, not to equate it that there are different versions of me or different parts of me. I just mean taking what people label as masculine and feminine and allowing them to be unified as just one person, as me, all of me.
Okay, so going back to queer, yeah, I mean, I grew up with queer being really derogatory. I mean, I remember playing Smear the Queer in the front yard with the boys in my front, you know, in my yard, and my neighbors and stuff. And Smear the Queer was like flag football. And it was like, it was just so derogatory. And it's like queer growing up for me has been a really not a good word. So I'm challenged with that word. I know that nowadays a lot of people are using it a little more flexible, more fluid, but I think that that word might be a little challenging also for the older generation to catch on. But my understanding of what you just said right now is that you identifying as queer mean that you will be very open and flexible to dating anybody in the spectrum, correct? In the gender spectrum.
Yeah, so it's not just anybody, it's anybody who I connect with, right? So it's not just like anyone on the street. It's like, come on, let's date. It's do we connect? Are we aligned? Like all those different things.
That's great. So queer nowadays is actually a very colorful word, not a negative word.
Yeah, well, again, it all depends on the person, right? I can't say that for everyone. Just like there's two of us here right now, and that's your experience, and this is my experience, and they're very, very different, and neither one of us are right or wrong. What then we must do is have conversations of, hey, if I use the word queer around you, is it going to be triggering it for you for me to share that my identity is queer? And if the answer is yes, then I'm going to navigate and try different words to see what's going to make you feel comfortable, so that when we're together, I'm not engaging in any kind of harm towards you. But it doesn't change my identity. It doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change how I feel. It's just now about an interpersonal relationship. And so it's about respecting other people and their identities while also respecting the people in the space that you're sharing with. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Well, thank you very much. I really wish our interview could be a lot longer. I feel like I have so much more to say in this topic, and there is so much more to say. That's why it's best to get your book called Gender Identities. And where can we pick that up?
So you can find Exploring My Identities on Amazon. If you just type in Exploring My Identities or Identity, because how it's worded is it's the word identity and then in parentheses IES, because it's speaking to not everybody has just one identity. They might have multiple every single human has multiple identities, whether it's race, age, whatever it might be. And so it's really trying to bring forth all these different identities that we hold and exploring what can be most affirming for ourselves, while also how to learn to respect and hold everyone else's identities.
Excellent. I'm really, really happy that you wrote this book. It's going to be opening eyes for a lot of people. And I really think that the education system needs to start bringing in these types of textbooks. I mean, we really need it in all different age groups, starting from preschool till high school, especially high school. Oh, man. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And I look forward to talking to you again in the near future.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks.